You've probably heard the story of King Solomon, right? The wisest man who ever lived. It's this classic tale of faith and reward, and it all kicks off with this huge offering to God. But what if the story we all think we know is actually missing the single most important detail?
So the version we usually hear goes something like this. Solomon makes 1,000 offerings, this incredible show of devotion. In some places, this has even inspired things like 1,000 days of prayer to find success. And God is so impressed, he shows up in a dream and basically gives Solomon a blank check. Solomon asks for wisdom, and boom, he gets it. Seems pretty straightforward, but it's never that simple, is it? The ancient text has a few secrets tucked away.
So, here's the twist. What if we've been focusing on the wrong thing? What if the number of offerings wasn't nearly as important as the location? What if the actual ground Solomon was standing on was the real key to understanding this entire story? Okay, so to get to the bottom of this, we first have to clear up a really common misunderstanding about that offering, because the phrase 1,000 offerings has caused, well, a little bit of confusion over the years.
First thing we got to get straight is this. This wasn't 1,000 separate events, like saying a prayer every single day for almost 3 years. Nope. The original text is actually describing one single, gigantic event where 1,000 sacrifices were offered all at once.
I mean, just stop and try to picture that for a second. 1,000 animals, all in one ceremony. The scale is just mind-boggling. This wasn't just a simple act of piety. This was a massive national statement. And it really makes you ask why. Why go to such an extreme? Well, the answer starts to unfold when you look at the tricky business of translation.
If you've ever tried to learn another language, you get this. Translating isn't just about swapping one word for another. You have to translate context and history and all the subtle meanings. And when you're talking about a text that's 3,000 years old, it is so easy for that original powerful meaning to get a little lost.
Let me give you a great example. In German, the word Stein means stone, and ein means one. So Einstein should mean one stone, right? But when you say it, nobody thinks of a rock, they think of the physicist Albert Einstein. The context completely flips the meaning. And that exact same kind of problem is right at the heart of Solomon's story. So with that in mind, let's shift our focus. Let's move from the what of the offering to the where. Because those 1,000 sacrifices, they didn't just happen anywhere. They happened at a place with a dark, painful, and incredibly important history.
The location was a place called Gibeon. Now for us today, that's just a name on an ancient map. But for someone living in Solomon's time, that name, it would have sent a shiver down their spine. Gibeon was not a happy place. It was a place of deep national shame.
And here's the backstory. Generations before Solomon, Israel had made a sacred promise, a covenant, to protect the people of Gibeon. But King Saul, one of Solomon's predecessors, broke that promise in the worst way possible. He slaughtered them. The fallout was catastrophic. It led to a terrible famine that nearly destroyed the nation under the next king, David. So Gibeon was like this open, festering wound in the nation's memory. So you see, Gibeon stood for everything that had gone wrong. A promise broken by a king, a terrible massacre, a deep division among the people, and this historical debt that had never truly been paid. And this is the exact spot Solomon chooses for his very first major act as king. This changes everything. The moment you understand the location, you can finally understand Solomon's real motive. This wasn't some new king trying to show off. This was about cleaning up a horrific mess left behind by the leaders before him. You see, he wasn't trying to impress God with his riches or power. He was desperately trying to heal his broken nation. That massive sacrifice of 1,000 animals, it was a profound attempt to cover the blood-soaked ground of Gibeon, to atone for the sins of the past, and to signal that a new, better chapter was beginning.
What he was really praying for was something like this. Let this place of betrayal and death be transformed. Let this ground that cries out with the blood of the innocent finally become a holy place where God's presence can actually live. It was a plea to stop this cycle of violence and division. And God heard him.
Which, of course, brings us to that famous dream. God appears to Solomon and makes him an incredible offer. But what Solomon asks for in that moment, well, that might just be the most misunderstood part of this whole story. I mean, think about it. This is the ultimate blank check. Ask what I shall give you. He could have asked for anything, riches, a long life, the death of his enemies. But Solomon, standing on the haunted ground of Gibeon, with the weight of a fractured kingdom on his shoulders, He asked for something totally different.
For centuries, we've just translated his request with one simple English word, wisdom. But that one word, it just doesn't do justice to the power and the precision of the original Hebrew phrase that he used.
The actual phrase is lev shomea, and it translates far more beautifully and accurately as a listening heart. Not just a smart brain, not a high IQ, but a heart that can truly, deeply hear.
And look, the difference between a wise heart and a listening heart isn't just semantics, it's profound. A wise heart suggests intellect, knowing things. But a listening heart, that implies empathy, discernment, an openness to really understanding other people, and, crucially, to hearing guidance from God.
And suddenly, it all just clicks into place. The offering, the location, and the specific request, they weren't separate things. They were all part of one single powerful story of national healing.
So why a listening heart? Well, think about it. To rule a nation that was so deeply wounded by the violence of the king before him, Solomon knew he couldn't just rely on his own cleverness. He needed to hear God. He needed to hear the unspoken pain of his people. He needed to hear the lessons from the ghosts of Gibeon so he wouldn't repeat the mistakes of the past. That was the only path to judging fairly and actually healing his kingdom.
And what this does is completely redefine what we think of as wisdom. It suggests that true, profound wisdom isn't about having all the answers. It's about having the humility and the capacity to truly listen to history, to the people around you, and to a voice that's bigger than your own.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? Solomon faced the deep wounds of his nation not with more force or with clever arguments, but with an active healing and a prayer for a listening heart. It just makes you wonder, in our own noisy, divided world, what problems in our families, in our communities, and even in our own lives are just waiting to be solved, not by the person who can shout the loudest, but by the one who finally decides to listen.